Just perhaps quickly introduce myself and Women in Africa and Meet With, so you know what this is all about. My name is Hafsat Abiola, and I'm the president of Women in Africa. I actually come from Nigeria, but I live between Belgium and Nigeria now. And I've been president of Women in Africa for about 3 years. Women in Africa, for me, is really the support for all the women entrepreneurs, women working to contribute to the economy across the African continent. We work in every country. We have ambassadors in about 50 in Africa, and we have ambassadors outside of Africa. We think of them as diaspora ambassadors. We have in France, in the United Kingdom, in Switzerland, even in Colombia, in Jordan. We have everywhere, because African women are doing business everywhere and need support everywhere they're doing their business. And we've been growing our program partly with the support of women like the one that I'm going to introduce you to today. But these programs that we run are practical tools, services for the woman entrepreneur on the continent. Before the pandemic, we used to convene. Our big thing that we used to do then was to convene in Morocco. We would gather almost 1,000 people from all over the planet to celebrate, highlight, and support African women entrepreneurs. But because of the pandemic, we've not been doing that, but we are offering these webinars, which have been reaching hundreds of thousands of people. But we also offer training. We offer mentoring. The training we do in partnership with Honoris United Universities. Mentoring we offer with Deloitte. We've also been doing some studies with Roland Berger. We work with all kinds of partners, UNESCO, African Union, and others to support African women entrepreneurs. And luckily, through these partnerships, we've been able to grow the size of the reach of our program, so that initially we were helping about 54 women across Africa through the WIA 54 program that would choose one woman per African country. And now we are supporting around 10 women in each African country, so that 54 is now 540. And through the support of Coca-Cola Foundation, we're able to grow that even more to 7,000 actually in several countries, and with a total reach of 20,000 women over the next 3 years. And through Africa Development Bank, we're also able to support about 9,000 women in Central Africa. Our guest today is one of the brightest stars that we have on the continent, and she's someone that I just adore. I met her about 10, maybe 12 years ago. And when I met her, it was at a private dinner. We were only about 20, 30 of us at this private dinner. And she got up and she spoke about African women and their need for support. I don't know, Vanessa, if you even remember this. It was the rock stars dinner. And then you spoke about the need for us to focus on this issue of African women. That's really what she's really dedicated herself to for many years. If I give you a bio, just so that I don't miss anything. Vanessa Moungar is originally from Chad, but she's a dual citizen of Chad and France. And she's the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at LVMH, where she supervises the global coordination of the group's actions on diversity, equity, and inclusion. A citizen of Chad and France, she sits on the French President Emmanuel Macron's Presidential Council for Africa and is a visiting lecturer at Sciences Po in Paris. Between 2017 and 2021, she was Director for Gender, Women, and Civil Society at the Africa Development Bank. Note please that she was the youngest director. In fact, becoming director was such like a scandal, because all these older people who thought they should have gotten that opportunity were not really in favor of this very young looking woman. But even then, she had already come from quite a lot of experience, which she quickly showed, she quickly demonstrated, because while she was there, she was able to drive the bank's action to unlock $5 billion for women and entrepreneurs across Africa's 54 countries. Before that, before joining Africa Development Bank, she was the senior manager for Africa at the World Economic Forum, where she worked between 2013 and 2017, leading large-scale private-public collaboration efforts across multiple industries to drive investment into Africa. There, she also led the demographic dividend agenda with a multi-stakeholder group of global experts with the aim of accelerating investments directed at women and young people. Please help me welcome Vanessa. Vanessa, it's so lovely to see you. You look stunning.
Thank you, Hafsat.
On your wedding in August. And my prayer is that with every decade that passes, you find that your love, you and your husband's love for each other only ever grows, and that that you grow old together. My very best vision is of old couples when they're in their 80s and 90s and they're walking together. They often, when I lived in Beijing in China, I would see them taking walks together. And I really, now you're so gorgeous, but I really look forward to the time when you're in your 80s and 90s and you and your husband are holding hands and still together, still airtight, And I hope, that every challenge that you have serves to be food for your marriage in the best way.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Hafsat. What an introduction, and thank you for your blessings. It's amazing, and it's typical of you, really making people feel welcome and loved and surrounded by kindness. So thank you for being that person and for continuing to create safe spaces for us to get together.
I wanted to open up and just have just some questions so that we can, because the whole concept of Meet With is so that we can really empower and inspire other African women across Africa so that they can be the very best that is possible for them. So I wanted to, in that vein, just ask you a couple questions to start the conversation and then open up to others so that they can ask their questions as they've been listening. So my first question to you is, when I think of my life, I can think of key moments that really shape who I am today. So if I were to ask you, Vanessa, what are the key moments in your life that has made it that you are the person we're looking at today and that you're just this way? So just a few examples to give us a sense of what drives Vanessa Moungar.
Absolutely. Well, happy to share the turning points. And you were saying it's about empowering and inspiring each other. That would be amazing if we can have that effect. And I think that sharing our stories as transparently and vulnerably as we can hopefully be helpful to others that might be facing some decisions or some key moments at the same time. So I'll try and do that as genuinely as possible. And feel free to guide me or ask me specific questions. But so as you were saying, I'm Chadian and French, and that starts who I am because I have a very plural identity. And, growing up with this dual identity, if you will, but I think it's many more than two, was always for me a source of wealth and strength. And, you have two choices. Either you feel uncomfortable everywhere, like you don't fit anywhere, or you decide, or you try and decide that you fit everywhere and that you could be from anywhere. And I really have to credit my parents for this, for giving me that strength and that belief that who I was beautiful and was a wealth of different types of identities and experiences and cultures and stories and histories that would guide me along the way. But so growing up between these two countries, which are pretty much at the end of the spectrum when it comes, opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to development, was for me very early on. I was very aware of the imbalance that prevails in the world and of my privilege. Spending my vacations in Chad with my cousins, having fun, and then coming back to France to go to school, knowing that not all of them had the same privilege, understanding already early on that I didn't deserve any more, but that I had some privilege more access to opportunity, to quality education, to health services and others. And I think that's where the seed was planted in me to say, okay, the whole to whom much is given, much is expected. Since you've had opportunity to have access to maybe more, then maybe it would be a good idea to kind of dedicate yourself to leveling the playing field and sharing that opportunity with more people. So that's what's been guiding me. And I think it's probably the only red thread in my career, because I've been through, I've been to the public-private sector, I've worked in different continents, and what's guiding me is always when I see opportunities for impact, to try and have impact, positive impact on other people's lives. That's what gives me strength and energy and gets me going. So otherwise, so that was kind of the guiding theme. But I studied business in undergrad in France because I wanted to make the world a better place. But also I was looking at governments thinking, okay, maybe they could be doing better. So if that's not what's driving them, I see business coming to invest in Africa. I see all these opportunities. How do we leverage this into a source of job creation, a source of wealth? So that's why I wanted to study business, to understand how we could leverage that opportunity. Then I was obsessed with the idea of getting my master's from Harvard University. Why? Because it's the only university in the world, and my grandmother, I think you lost my sound. Am I back? That my grandmother in Chad knew, I think, because one day she said something like, Harvard, if only one of my daughters could go there. And I remember specifically thinking at that time, okay, I'll make it my mission. And years later, when I graduated in Paris, I was thinking, okay, so to do my master's in Harvard, what do I need to do? And it's always that thing, you have an objective, how do we get there? Well, in the United States, if you want to get a degree, you need to work first. So I started looking for a job in the US, and I spoke to everybody I could, asking for contacts, networks. I just had to find a job in New York. I was also obsessed with the idea of New York, because if you can make it there, you'll make it anywhere. And I was also a big Sex and the City fan back then, I have to admit. So it was my dream to walk those streets and to make my mark there. So the dean of my school back then put me in touch with a friend of his who was started a business, and they put me through 6 interviews to give me an internship offer. And I landed in New York with my 2 suitcases and just a few, I think $1,000 in my pockets, to say, what's the worst that could happen? And I ended up staying with them about 8 years. The company grew, I started doing door-to-door sales, which, by the way, then seemed like a terrible job, but I didn't care because I was there and I had an objective. But now in hindsight, it's probably where I learned so much, and we can come back to that. But I grew in my role from door-to-door sales to later heading sales and marketing, and thinking that it was time for me to realize the dream of going back to school. And so I applied. I managed to get into Harvard, and I did an executive education degree so I could keep working at the same time and put myself through school without getting into huge debt. That was a difficult time of my life, because for 2 years I actually worked and studied at the same time. And the first year I was living in New York, so I would commute 3 times a week to Boston. It's a 3.5-hour bus ride, and then you come back during the night and you work the next day. I give this level of details just because it wasn't easy, but I was so determined to make it happen. So it's to tell maybe some younger sisters that may be considering some studies or something, whatever it takes, if that's your objective, give yourself the means to do it. I also couldn't afford and didn't want to put my parents through so much debt. So we made it happen this way. And after graduation, I really wanted to go to the continent. I had this idea of, okay, now I want to work and live on the African continent so I can really contribute and serve on the ground. But before that, I was actually asking for advice, asking to my professors, one of them, Callistus Juma, who was one of my mentors at Kennedy School, who was an amazing teacher who passed a few years ago. And he's the one who recommended the World Economic Forum. He said, go there. It's a place where they will bring together the brightest and most powerful of the world in the same rooms. If you can sit with them, listen and learn. They write reports about everything, the future of work, the future of agriculture, the future of automotive. Listen and learn, build your network. And I also had so I started looking and I found this position to actually lead West and Central Africa, which for me was an amazing opportunity. So I was based in Geneva, not on the continent, but I spent the whole time traveling across West and Central Africa to drive investment into these countries. At the same time, managing the agenda of the demographic dividend, so working on these questions of investing in women and youth. What are the policies that are working? What are the investments that are working, etc. From there, it was time to do the jump. And I saw the opportunity to join the African Development Bank at a critical time of its history. We had the incredible leadership of President Adesina, who had just joined and had decided to make women's economic empowerment a priority. We also had the incredible Jennifer Blanque as VP for Human and Social Issues, whom I had met at the World Economic Forum and who I had immense admiration for and trust in. And so I went for it and applied. You know, crazy thing to do when you're 32 or 33, I think back then, to apply for a director role at the African Development Bank. But if you never apply, no one will come and ask you to come for a role. So you have to be your first advocate and your first sponsor. So I managed to get into the bank. And as you were saying, Hafsat, it was a really interesting time because, of course, it was a challenge. I was young, I mean, relatively young. For a continent that is so young, it's so interested that we're still talking about this young women. But anyways, too young for this role, too women for this role, too everything for this role. And I understood where people were coming from as well. You have institutions like these where some people have been in the trenches for years and it's very difficult to evolve, to grow in the institution. And so arriving from the outside, you have to be extremely humble. Work with everyone, bring them on board with your vision and see how together we can have impact, basically also prove what you're bringing to the table. So it took time, but we built this amazing team that I'm so proud of and I still miss every day of women and men across the continent. We started with a very small team. Now I think there are about 50 people spread across the continent, across the different countries, working on mainstreaming gender in the bank's operations, but also unleashing women entrepreneurs' power and potential, thanks to the program you were referring to, the AFAWA program, which is one I'm the most proud of. Because at the same time, as I was working at the African Development Bank, I was also called to join President Macron's Council for Africa. Interesting, because I had been living outside of France for over 10 years by that time. And I didn't understand why they would reach out to me. And their point was to say, well, we actually want to have a council. They have many advisors already. So his idea was to have a group of people that are not from the establishment that could speak truth to power, tell him without filter how we could think about building a different relationship with the continent. And so my topics were obviously investments, international aid when it comes to women and men. And the whole narrative was, let's support African solutions to African challenges. Let's work with African stakeholders. And back then the stars were aligned. That's how we were able to raise also 400 million from the G7 in 2019, which thanks to the program managed to unlock $5 billion, which are now being not distributed because it's a guarantee scheme to really back up women entrepreneurs, but distilled across all 54 countries. So that was amazing. And then at the same time, you know, every time I love challenges. You know, and it had been a few years. Our team was built. We were on the track on a number of areas. And this opportunity came along to also have impact on a different area, on a different level, and also come closer to my parents who are today living in France. And so I thought, interesting alignment of stars here again, to have potential impact by joining LVMH, which is the leader of luxury in so many different sectors that has 75 different companies within the group on an agenda like diversity and inclusion from a transversal perspective, thinking about how do we attract, retain, and develop the best and the brightest from around the world, regardless of their skin color, who they are, what they believe in, true meritocracy, access to opportunity, which is what has always motivated me. But beyond that, all the people we work with, the partners we work with, you know, our supply chain, which by the way, is all around the world, including in Africa. How do we have positive impact through that? And finally, also, how do we communicate in a way that is diverse and inclusive for all of our stakeholders around the world? So here I am today speaking to you from our office in Paris, and that's been my professional journey, really supported by so many amazing angels on earth and in the sky. And at the same time, also, as you mentioned, we all always talk about the professional side, but on the personal front, also have the privilege of having an amazing man in my life, as well as an amazing son, who make me very happy on a daily basis. And so I am also one of these women trying to make it all work and balance. And don't ask me for the secret. If you have it, please tell me. I can tell you how I try to manage. So that's it in a nutshell, Hafsat.
Sweetie, I was going to ask you, what are the factors that you think when you listen to that? But can I first tell you what I heard in terms of factors, and then you can maybe add?
Yeah.
So what I was hearing when I listened to you was that you were prepared to struggle. You were not intimidated by work. And even when it seemed impossible, you really figured out a way to make it work. Like, that's not easy to take the bus, the Greyhound, I think, from Boston to New York, the times they run, and you get in maybe at 4 a.m. I can only just imagine how difficult that period must have been. But you did it, and you made that work at Harvard. You made it work with your job. And you were always your own first advocate. You said, you have to be your own first advocate. So we always talk about women needing to have sponsors, champions, but you maybe need to be the very first person championing yourself. Mm. And then you can recruit a whole team. You said when you were given an opportunity in major spaces, you would communicate without filter, and you were pushing the idea of supporting African solutions to African challenges when you were given the opportunity on President Macron's council. You said you would go for what would seem like a pipe dream, like a far reach, whether it was applying for the job at World Economic Forum or the Africa Development Bank, because why not give it a try and see what you could get? So you have this predisposition to say yes to challenging opportunities. I think my sister works at Amazon, and she's always talking about one of the big Amazon ideas is bias for action. You have a strong bias for action in your orientation. That's what I was hearing. What else would you say that I missed?
Thank you. And thank you for this, Hafsat. I was taking notes. So next time somebody asks me. No, I mean, hard work is the number one. That's the one thing nobody can ever take away from you. People will say, oh, you're there, you have this because of that, because you know this person, because you look like this, because they can always have many reasons, but you know for yourself that your hard work took you there. And I don't think anybody, I don't know actually, but that's the only thing that ever worked for me. So hard work first. I think the moral compass, it's also very important. Everybody thinks of themselves as well-intentioned and having the right values, but you really test it on the ground on a daily basis. And the more senior in an organizations you get, etc., the more decisions you have to make, the more arbitrations you have to make. And so it's all about, at that time, your moral compass. Nobody can tell when you feel something is right or wrong. You need to act on that. Don't think twice. Our intuition is usually very strong and very good. There's a reason why it's there. We sometimes try not to listen to it. So really always moral compass, because you can never have regrets when you do that. I think what you were saying about be your first advocate, I think what I meant there is also change starts with you. Nobody can help you if you're not helping yourself. Nobody should, in fact, because, everybody deserves help and support. And I think even when you think about mentors and sponsors along the way, you have to show them your determination, what you're passionate about, your hard work. And that's what encourages people to help you, not necessarily coming to ask for help. So it's all coming in the right order when it's preceded by one's hard work, own dedication and vision. So super important. But I think, yeah, the most important and the central one is work hard, because in all these stages, I remember working very hard, and that's always what helped me get to the next phase.
Mm. I think also we often hear now from people when they talk about their success, they talk about mentors, they talk about coaches, they talk about sponsors. What is your sense, Vanessa, of the importance of those three categories of champions that people talk about now that help propel your career?
Crucial. At the end of the day, we are human beings living together in groups, in environments. It's always about humans interacting with each other. And none of us knows better on their own. So first of all, asking for advice, asking for support, but asking for advice is really the best way to, when I think about my mentors, when people ask me, I actually have lots of people along the way that really helped me and gave me advice, but I never really formally asked them to be mentors. It's just, you go to people with humility, you ask for their advice, you observe their experience, and they naturally want to help you. I think in terms, when you're talking about role models, it really starts at home. I was lucky to have amazing role models at home as well. On my mother's side, both my mother and grandmother, single moms, super hardworking, extremely generous. My mom is the one, we used to live in an apartment building. And so she would pay for the electricity bill of the lady living underneath with her 3 kids because they didn't have light for a month. Or we would go to the other lady next door who was fighting with her husband, and I would hold the door while my mom would separate them, so that kind of justice for all. She was a nurse, right? So it's not like we had amazing means, but whatever we had, we shared, and we fought for what we felt was right. And so I think this is also so important, and I say this because many of us today are moms or aunties or sisters. And so people are looking, and whatever we do inspires who their future selves will be. On the father side, also extremely strong role models. Women, again, like my grandmother on the paternal side, she's that woman who, in Chad, over 70% of women cannot read or write. That's the statistics. That is actually excruciating for me, because even when we're talking about support to women entrepreneurs and economic empowerment, very hard when you're illiterate. However, I know from my experience with my grandmother that we joke that she couldn't read or write, but she could count. Because she used to work on the fields, and little by little she was buying parcels of land. And when she was about to pass, she asked all her children to come together. So she had 10 children, 6 girls, 4 boys. And she told them, guys, to the boys, don't be mad, but I'm going to leave all the land to your sisters. Surprising for a woman that was born at the beginning of the 20th century in southern Chad, which, by the way, shows that these are not Western ideals.
Mm-hmm.
She said, I'm doing this because I never want you to be fully dependent on anybody. Mm. And that was also another seed planted in me. So, role modeling from Chad to France, but very different profiles. And my dad was also an amazing, somebody who's been committed to hard work, who studied. He was one of the 3 kids in Chad that year to get his high school diploma, was shipped to Russia, felt like what he was studying wasn't good enough. So he camped at the Chadian embassy to be sent back and get the education he was promised. That's how he managed to get another scholarship to come to France and to become a surgeon. From there, he started a political party, and he's been in the opposition since then. And I also grew up with this very strong civil and social conscience of what our responsibility to society is supposed to be. So this is for my close role models. But beyond that, I think I can think of so many teachers, managers, even just people along the way. We are all the results and the products of everything that came into our brains, in terms of our making decisions, but also all the people that helped us along the way. Nobody made it alone, nobody. And so I think also one of the strong things that I always try and transmit is stay humble, be humble. It's also one of the most powerful weapons actually we have. And when I was in sales in New York, I actually had a little book that was, I think the title was Nice Girls Get the Sale Too. Because I kept thinking, I cannot be aggressive. People will tell you a salesperson has to be aggressive. And no, I never had that approach. And my motto was killing them with kindness. And that's actually, I think, a motto for life, being kind to yourself and to others. I think that's also something you can never regret.
Lady, when you talk about that, I remember when you first started at Africa Development Bank. In fact, I think in your first few months, you flew into Paris, and our mutual friend and I came to you to see you in the hotel. I don't know if you remember.
Oh, yes.
And you were telling us about
everything I was going through.
about how it was going, because you were so young. You were so young. And, African cultures, it's such an interesting continent, and, it's diverse, we know, but there's always, across the continent, we can say there's some commonalities, which includes, if you have a bias for action, across the continent, there's a bias towards older people. There's a bias for elders. It's the one who respect, and I love that. I think that's one of
Me
the
too.
strengths. But when through the process at AFDB, they had noted that you were exceptional and should be given this incredible opportunity, you would have wanted people to and just embrace that. But there was a lot of pushback and a lot of people trying to, kind of sabotage you. And I actually think that that's also, I would love for you to share any insights that very difficult experience gave you, an experience that you actually ended up coming out on top of, because by the time you left, even you had already left, and they did a survey of all the bank about staff morale in the different departments. Your department ranked happiest in the whole bank because of your leadership, which I think says in such a wonderful testament to the asset that you were to the bank, that they recognized, even essentially the leadership had recognized from the beginning, but the whole bank recognized by the end. But there are many Black women, and Black women in general, but maybe even African women across Africa in their different countries, who have been second guessed, are being denied leadership opportunities. What advice could you give to them based on your experience?
So, that's a tough one, Hafsat, but I can share what I've been through. And again, as you were saying, we have cultures where age and seniority command respect. And that's something that I highly value as well. In the professional context, however, you want competence and merit to prevail. And so what was interesting for me, having worked in Europe, in the US, in Africa on the nonprofit side, but walking into a big institution like the African Development Bank, was to realize that, yes, it was very traditional, hierarchical, a little bit patriarchal, like many of the organizations we have on the continent. And so again, you have two options in these kinds of cases. Either you walk in, you scream, you explain who you are and why you're not recognizing me, etc. At least that's not my approach. I felt like, okay, that's the context. Read your context. You're a little bit like, outside of the lines, basically. You don't resemble their traditional director, because I think the average age was maybe 55, and of course they're mostly men. But it doesn't matter. People are not being tough with you because it's you. It's because of everything you represent. It's like how everybody wants women and young people in power, except over them. It's exactly that. And so I took it upon myself to say, this is where you really are going to have to really bring people on board, to know that it's not personal. And I remember my first team meeting where I addressed, I know what's going on, because even within my own team, there was questioning, but we don't know each other. We're going to learn to know each other, to work together, and hopefully have impact together. And so it's really working, again, hard with everyone, demonstrating what you're capable of doing, what you're bringing to the table, not taking people with arrogance, being humble as well, listening, being willing to work, doing all this, but also delivering at the same time, which I believe helped me build credibility slowly but surely. And also, because sometimes people ask, what are your biggest obstacles? What were your biggest obstacles? And it's a very difficult question, because it's all about perception. I see challenges and obstacles, but if I had to think about the hardest part is people. those people that are resistant to change, that can seem to be on your way, that are not always nice, you know, and whose cynicism seems to want to prevent you from moving forward. These can feel like obstacles, and maybe they're in your life today. Yes, they're there and they won't go away. But I think first, always in the spirit of kindness, try not to judge them, because they've most likely been jaded by their experiences, you know, and it could be any of us someday. Please tell me if I ever become too cynical.
No, I can't imagine.
Because we have so many challenges, though, you know, and we're idealists, etc. And so you try, and you don't always succeed. Like I said, for me, it's not failure; it's just challenges. So you keep trying, but you can get tired of trying. So, and I think sometimes the people that are the most cynical are former idealists who've lost hope. So I think don't let them on the side. Bring them along. Take more time. It takes time to work with people. It takes time to listen and to build relationships. But I think that's what you need the most, whatever the environment, whether it's corporate, public sector, etc., in any organizations and societies at the end of the day, is relationships with people, what they know you stand for, and their experience of you. So you need to take the time to build those relationships, even with the ones who resist to it. Always take the high road. That's been my experience in the bank. And it works with time because, as you said, Hafsat, long term, well, some of the directors who were my biggest attackers when I joined are still in touch with me today. And we have great relationships, you know, but I had to demonstrate, you know, it didn't come with my age or anything else. So I had to prove what I was able to. But we have this relationship, and that staff survey, interestingly, the team, they weren't the happiest on every level. Like, not everything was beautiful. You need to interview them to really know what their experience was. But on dimensions like being able to speak up, feeling like your team is a family or friends, being able to take initiative, etc., they ranked highest. And that's the type of leadership I also believe in, because you need to be treated the way you want to be treated. And very often in our most traditional environments, we don't empower people below us. So there again, it was about challenging the status quo, managing in a way that people didn't, and believing in what I was doing. You know, when I joined specifically, some people told me, you need to stop smiling so much. Horrible for me. Yeah? Like, I really like to smile, because I actually think that when you smile, it even has an impact on your brain, makes it happier. So anyway, you need to stop smiling, because what works is the stick. You need to be tough. That's how people listen. I was like, never. If I do that, I'll be miserable. The first thing for anybody leading anything is authenticity. So I'll stay true to myself. And worst case, if that doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. You know, I can rebound. I'll do something else, but I'll try my way. And I have to stay true to myself. So again, these are the little tips of the things I've learned along the way, but be true to yourself, believe in yourself, you know, but with humility, show what you can do, listen to people, bring them along, and build a coalition of the willing, because there is no big change that any one single of us can do on their own. And if you have the privilege of leading your team, also know that you're only as good as your team. So what we invest in our teams when we recruit them, but also the time we spend with them, the way we interact with them is crucial. And so that's why it's also so hard to leave your team. And for me, leaving my team at the African Development Bank was a hard time. Thankfully, I'm still in touch with many of them. And now I'm creating this new team here with fantastic people I've met. And hopefully we can also reach some new heights of impact.
I'm so proud of you, Vanessa. You're really awesome.
Oh, thanks, Hafsat. So, and you, look who's talking.
So, you know, I wanted to ask one last question, but I see that we're getting some questions from LinkedIn as well. And there is one other question that came in directly on from Zoom. The question from Zoom is from a young woman, and she says, "What advice would you give young women to gain confidence?"
So, as I was saying before, you know, it really starts with you. And that's the hardest part, because we tend to be our strongest, our biggest, we can be our biggest advocates, but we can also be our biggest, what's the right word? Obstacle, if we want. You know, it's like in the animated movies when we were little, you know, you have the little angel and the little devil. The little angel is cheering you up, telling you you can do it. The little devil is like, no, you'll never do this. You're not good enough. We all have both. We all have both. Just before turning on for this webinar, you always have this syndrome of, what am I going to say? How relevant will it be to your audience? Know that we all feel it. So none of you or us has magic powers of permanent self-confidence. It's only what it looks like. So that's the first thing we need to say. So we know we're all on the same level. Then, of course, there's different ways. And I think that's where we also have a responsibility as parents to try and boost the self-confidence of our children as young as they can, because there's also that level of influence. But in concrete, what you can do on a daily basis is kind of remind yourself of what you've done, what brought you here, what your strengths are, and to rely on them. Try to be factual. Try to be factual. What have you accomplished? Has anybody given you everything you have for free? And that's what you should already be proud of. Think about the privileges you have or the achievements you've made, and how other people behind you, in a sense, maybe younger than you or with different backgrounds than you, are looking up to you. So you can always be an inspiration for somebody. Don't be tough on yourself. Be kind to yourself. Listen to the little angel and try and shut the mouth of the little devil, because he's not helpful to you. However, just keep the humility, because overconfidence is not a good thing either. So it's finding the right level, but try and be factual, because it doesn't help to kind of always bring ourselves down internally. It really doesn't help. Also, the support system, your friends, your mentors, speak to people. Sometimes when we feel bad, we leave it inside ourselves. But then if I give a phone call to somebody like Hafsat or another friend and share how I'm feeling, you can be sure that when we hang up the phone, maybe she'll have helped me to see things from a different perspective and to feel better. So rely on others. It's not being weak to ask for help or to put your head on someone else's shoulders. And then choose your partners wisely, ladies. I think that's also one of the most, and I think that's valid for men and women. Huh? Probably, I don't remember who it was, Bill Gates, I think, but who was saying the most important decision you make is who you marry, married or not. People that are around you have an impact on you. Positive, negative, you can judge yourself. So these are the little recipes I have, but start with being really kind to yourself and knowing that we all feel the same way. So it's not such a big deal.
Thank you, Vanessa. Priscilla Okpali and Jenny Landman are asking the same question, but Priscilla prefaces her question by saying that your aura is contagious. So just know that they find your aura to be contagious. And the question is, how do you balance your kindness with power and assertiveness? She's Jani, I think Jani or Yanni, I'm not sure how she pronounces it. She says, sometimes in the business world, kindness is misconstrued for weakness and does not get the results we're after. And it's pretty much the same question from Priscilla.
No, it's absolutely true. And it's a question I sometimes ask myself, although, as I mentioned, I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
So I don't want to pretend to be somebody else. And let me first go back a minute, because as you said, in the business environment, we have this tendency of thinking that it's either or. So you're either kind or you're powerful, charismatic, and so therefore aggressive, etc. This is also related to all our unconscious biases in terms of what leadership is. And we've been led mostly by male figures who apparently demonstrated some of these traits. And so sometimes we think that's what a leader is supposed to be, because that is what we see. However, I firmly believe that we can change that, And as I said, leadership is authenticity. So first of all, I don't think you can really evolve in your leadership if you're trying to be somebody else. It has to be you growing. And if you're a kind person, keep that. That will be an incredible magnet for talent, for people to work around you, for people to join your team, for colleagues to want to join your project. It works. It just takes a bit more time. But what kind of leader do you want to be? Someone people follow because they have to or because they want to? Well, I want to be the latter, But like I said, it takes more time. But as I said, at the end of the day, I don't think you choose. I think it is what it is. There are days where I think I've been too nice, and or where I know that because I'm being nice and participative and inclusive, some people will read that as weak. Well, let them try. And don't try and disrespect me, because I can also give you a very cold and always respectful face. But I say, with me, you start here. And so you can only go down and disappoint me. You know how people, they always say, I don't trust anybody. You need to earn my trust little by little. Well, I'm the opposite. There again, I didn't choose. It's like that. But so I give everyone the same benefit of the doubt, and I give them my true self. If you want to disappoint me or show me that you don't deserve that kindness, fine, I'll just know how to interact with you. But I'll stay true to myself. And that's my best advice to you. I think we also need to be more of us with this attitude. We can change leadership models. They will change. We are in the midst of a complete change and shift in the work cultures around the world. It's not just a Western thing. The way we work, the way we interact with each other is changing. So we can be these agents of change. They don't have to be somebody else.
Bravo. No, I completely agree with what you've said. I was recently doing a project for like 2 months, and the culture was so, the culture I was in Nigeria, and the culture there in this particular arena can be so dysfunctional. It doesn't really serve. And you have to decide, are you going to be part of the problem? Or are you going to be part of the solution? I think there's only ever that choice. You can conform, and you'll maybe you'll have more money, more reward that comes to you when you do that. But if it's undermining the whole country, if it's undermining a whole system, then how is it worth it?
It's not.
Why conform to that? That the change, as you say, begins with us.
And so many people are yearning for that glimpse of hope, that it can be different.
Yes.
And so we're breaking the glass ceilings. And even when we're talking about the bank, all I hope is that next time they see a younger director, they don't react the same way.
Yeah.
And so if you are, whatever the organization is that you're in, if you manage to deliver your work but to do it kindly, I'm sure it will have a positive influence on some people you might not even know of. So don't lose the faith. We're a coalition of the willing. That really touched me, that question, because nobody should give up on being kind, really. It's the world we want to live in. Just always think about that. What world do we want, and what part do we play in creating it?
I also think when you said that the survey that was done of all the staff, it wasn't in all the dimensions that you were shown to be just the very best department. But in the dimensions that it was shown that yours was the best, those were the dimensions that meant the most to you. I think that we need to always be aware that we can't win in every dimension, but to decide what is the most important areas for us, and then strive for excellence in those areas.
Yeah.
Because you can't win in all the areas, and you especially not all the time. It's like what you were saying at the very beginning about being married and having this high-flying career, and you're trying to have it all. And everything I've seen from women that had a similar path is that you can have it all, but sometimes not all at the same time.
Exactly.
So sometimes you will find that your work, maybe there's something due and it will just demand that much more time. So you can't spend that much time at home. And then sometimes you can flip towards more time at home than at work. So it depends on what's really going on, and to be able to be wise enough to assess that and know what to do.
Yes. And again, to show kindness to yourself, because we have this tendency of trying to be, and there's this myth of the superwoman, like you can do everything and be fully invested and involved in everything. So perfect mom, perfect wife, perfect worker, perfect manager, perfect everything. Let's be kind to ourselves. And as you said, it's prioritizing things at the right time. But on that one, again, is the support system.
Yeah.
That really makes a big difference, and also all the interviews I've heard of women CEOs or other women in positions of power, it's always been about the support system.
Now you're at LVMH, and it's such a huge responsibility that you, across 75 companies that are some of the leading companies on the planet, you're driving their diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda. What what do you think about, because what you were able to achieve at Africa Development Bank was just so groundbreaking. What would groundbreaking in this new field, in this new space be like for you?
It's really helping a group to be ever more ambitious on those issues. Look, it's very humbling to walk into this huge group, as you mentioned, extremely powerful, already leading on all the markets they're in. And there's also something about that when you're already the leader, striving, in competing against yourself pretty much to always see how can we be better and more sustainable in the long term. And for me, like anything else, it's about our people, the way we treat people internally and externally that will help the group continue to grow. And so for me, anything we can do to ensure more inclusion, more attractiveness for our talents, I want everybody to know LVMH is an option. There's hundreds of jobs on our website. You can go to lvmh.com. The company operates in over 80 countries. Yes, it's luxury. You can do it. It's like bring your skills. We want diverse talents. We want people from everywhere in the world, regardless of your backgrounds. If you're dedicated, willing to work hard, and to be part of those incredible universes, the door is there. So that's my objective, to really help them see opportunity and continue to leverage talents from all around the world, growing them within the group so that also sends strong messages internally and externally, working through our supply chains to see how we can have maximum impacts in everything we buy around the world, having positive impact in our external communications as well. All these things that the group is already doing, helping them have even more impact on those questions. So without unveiling too many of our goals, because that's not the topic of the day, it's really trying to see how the human aspect of our business and everything we do internally and externally can continue to drive us towards more impact, more growth, which in itself will continue to have a very virtuous cycle of value creation for the group and for society.
You have an anonymous question that is related to what you just talked about, Vanessa. It says, thank you, Vanessa. You're such an inspiration for us all. My question is why diversity, equity, and inclusion is becoming as important within LVMH?
Well, I think it's not just LVMH. It's a global momentum that we're seeing towards more equity in general. Different topics depending on the regions and the fabrics of societies. Gender equality, binary gender equality, has been under the spotlight for the past maybe couple of decades, even more strongly the last 10 years. And the narrative has been accelerating, but the narrative has been enlarging from the issue of empowering women to this idea of diverse societies with lots of different diversities, depending on what you're looking at, where everybody can actually thrive and be a part of it. So this is why I think you see all companies jumping on board, trying to do more, both from a recruitment perspective, but also from an external impact perspective. Why? Because business needs to have a positive impact on society. We're growing. It's a responsibility. We also want to hire the best. The best do not always come from the same mold. I think we now have research that demonstrates that diverse perspectives around the table leads to better decision making, more challenges, less blind spots. So there's also a business imperative there. We know it's a source of performance to have diverse teams. When it comes to our external communications, we have clients all around the world. We want them to feel a part of our worlds. There again, it's about opening the eyes, and opening our world to this world of opportunities that is out there. So I think it is definitely part of the group's DNA because it's so big, so wide, in so many industries around the world, over 170 nationalities. So you don't wake up and become diverse. It is diverse by nature. And our issue is how do we ensure that everyone can play their full role, explore their full potential, so that can continue to drive the group to new heights in the future. And so that's why this department was created. However, I often say, whether it's this department here or what I was doing at the African Development Bank, Department of Gender, I think this should not exist forever. And I know it's counterintuitive. Most people want their job to exist forever. I think this should accompany transitions, transformations as organizations realize they want to be more equitable. So we're here to help that However, this needs to become the new way of doing business. You don't need a D&I label on an action. It's a recruitment action. It's a communication action. It's a procurement action. It's not about diversity and inclusion. It's about fairness, equal access to opportunity, and meritocracy.
Yes, because I was even told that I was talking to some of the diaspora people here in England. You know, Liz Truss is now Prime Minister of England. I think she's only the second woman, no, third to be Prime Minister in England. And she has a position about meritocracy as well, very much aligned with what you were saying. There's a question from Divya Samont. She says that she's currently an undergrad student in PR and comms, working in the fashion industry, and she wants to work in the fashion industry in PR. She's wondering what advice you could give to her as she wants to enter the DE&I space within through her career. She says she's very passionate about DE&I.
That's wonderful.
Doesn't know where to start.
Well, pieces of advice. So it's always hard because, I would need to know more about your particular situation. But what I can share based on this information, first of all, congratulations on what you're doing, and excited that you're interested to come into the fashion world. And you should definitely look up the website, look for opportunities from internships to young professionals opportunities to join the group. And to work on those questions. I think if you're passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion, there's so many ways to work on that, or to work integrating these perspectives into what you do. And that's actually the ideal when I'm saying that a D&I team is there to help other teams to support the transformation in organizations. It means also working with people in PR, external communications, on making our image and communications more inclusive. So ideally, future professionals would have built in and would have that built in. And so I think this is what you need to continue to do, to keep on your path, external, PR, was that it? Public relations and communications.
Yes.
Yeah. And always keep this idea of integrating diversity and inclusion in the communications you put forward. I think that will also make a difference tomorrow in the recruitments that you make, that you specify that this is something you're very conscious of and that is integrated into your approach and your work. It doesn't mean you need to have a D&I title. This being said, there are also lots of jobs opening up in that space, because lots of organizations definitely want to be more ambitious on those topics and are building teams like mine. And even on my team, we recruit interns once a year. So it's not right now, but we put the offer on the website and look at all the CVs we receive.
There's also a question related to jobs at Africa Development Bank. Somebody's asking, Trina Kondoe is asking that, how do you get into such a notable organization, given the high level of corruption and favoritism within the continent? How can she make her way? And yeah. I think she says, apart from writing academic papers.
First, apply. Honestly, I've had this conversation before, and many people really think that at the bank, if you don't know somebody, you cannot work. Really don't think so. Honestly, having lived on the inside. So are there exceptions? Are there pockets? Maybe, but I can tell you what happened on my team. We would have positions, we would put them on the website, there would be shortlisting. There are at least, I don't know, over 5 to 10 people involved in the shortlisting process before you get to interview, just to try and avoid any kind of misbehavior in this whole thing, because the bank also wants to be transparent, also wants to bring in the brightest. So that's the process. So first, it starts with applying. So apply largely. That's the first thing. Now, the challenge is, it's true that sometimes recruitment processes, some people, to give you an idea, I would have positions I would post and get 400 applications or more. One job. So that means one person gets the job and 399 think that they didn't know the right person, Yeah. And out of these 399, there's great CVs, amazing people, passionate, who have written papers, etc. So I think there's no secret recipe to get in, but again, be your first advocate. People will tell you, you need to have piston, whatever that is, fine. Listen, let them talk. Try. try, you apply at the African Development Bank, you apply at the World Bank, you apply to all the other international organizations that are working on the issues that you care about. Once you're done applying, you wait and they will respond. One of them will respond. Believe in it, work your network, write to everyone. It doesn't mean that they will give you the job because they know you, but it means they can give you advice. For example, you see an opportunity on a website. That's what I would do when I was a student looking for my first job. Okay, so if I want to apply there, I'm going to look in my network. Who do I know who knows someone who works there? Then ask them if we can have an informational call to just have a quick conversation about how it works in that organization, what the work culture is, etc. People give you advice. The more you get, the better your cover letter will be, the more tailored your CV will be, the more likely you are to stand out of the crowd. If your strategy is to have the same CV, send it everywhere, and the same letter where you just change the person's name, and I'm not saying change your CV, I'm just saying in each experience, there's so many things you do. You try and demonstrate what is expected on the particular job you're applying to. I mean, so we're getting into the details, but be tailored. It's like marketing. You're applying for a job, you're selling yourself. But trust me, you can get into the bank. On my team, so many people we hired that didn't know any of us. So it is possible. Nothing is impossible.
The last thing, because we're at time, I think. Or are we at time? Eloise, can you tell me? Are we at time?
I think we're over time.
Yes, a bit over time. Thank you.
Okay, so I know we've run out of time, but I just wanted to ask you, so now you're in your 30s and you've made such an impact already. A young woman from a young continent, in fact, a young woman from the world's youngest continent. So there are many people that are like mini young versions of Vanessa all over the continent of Africa, from north to south, east to west, and in central. And when I listen to you, Vanessa, I just think that I feel that you have a strong desire for excellence. And I think that if Africa is going to really break free of centuries of challenges, because you say that it's all a challenge, it's not failures. If we're going to break free of centuries of challenges, we need to also look for how we cultivate that deep push for excellence. What message in that spirit would you care to share to close us out today?
I think, well, thank you so much, Hafsat. First of all, I want to thank you, the entire team, for everything you're doing at Women in Africa, for providing those spaces for us to connect. It's so crucially important, and for us to share our stories, hoping it helps someone somewhere. I think a last word, I really want us to move forward much faster. And in Africa, the problem is too many projects, too many pilots, too many, too little, too slow. We know women are the backbones of African economies. We know that. You go out at 6 a.m. in any of our capitals, it's them that you see working on the markets, working everywhere. It's not that men don't work, but we know women are the backbones of our economies. Yet they are marginalized from access to resources and to opportunity more generally. So I would like to kind of suggest that any of us in positions to accelerate, to help, to push, to advocate for more women empowerment across the continent, do it, because we need to be progressing faster. We cannot keep living on a continent that is, where people are suffering from so many unnecessary ills, not just the continent, the world, in fact. We want a place that is where opportunity is more fairly accessible, and we need our children to be living in a world that is at least slightly better than the one we lived in. So that's our responsibility. We can all make a difference when it comes to this. We shouldn't expect government, big businesses, or anybody to do it if we don't do our part. So let's be the change we want to see. I look forward to connecting. Don't hesitate to reach out to me on LinkedIn to connect. I don't respond to messages all the time because, as we said, balancing everything, if you're on top of it trying to respond to messages, you'll never sleep. But I am with you. just the fact, thank you for listening to me and to my story. I hope you find it useful, but we need to support each other. So I'm with you, I'm behind you. Be your number one sponsor.
Thank you, Vanessa, for an awesome conversation. I want you to know that listening to you, I can just see the long line from your grandmother runs strong through your parents, through you, and I know to your son and into the future for the continent. I really hope that the seeds of who you are get planted all over Africa. That bias for action, believing in yourself and pushing for excellence and working hard and relentlessly and remembering to be kind. Whenever I think of Africa, I think, not only are we the birthplace of humanity, I think we're the best expression of humanity, not in terms of material success, clearly, but in terms of how we care, how we look after. And if we could only have more confidence in ourselves and bring that forward into the world, we would make the world a better place. And people like you are doing that. You've done that in every organization in which you've worked. And now you're doing that within a global organization in the most powerful way. Just know that we're all behind you also from the continent, and we're all very proud of you. Well done, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Hafsat. And thank you, everyone.
Bye, ladies and men and gentlemen who joined us, and look forward to seeing you at the next Meet With. Bye-bye.